A lot of you here, if I ask, are you good people? You will say yes. But the question is, would you be good if you're in a system that first encourages you to be bad and evil, but pays you to be bad and evil? Or to make it worse, that punishes you if you push against being bad and evil, and if you want to stand up for yourself. And that's the whole point of this model. The point of this model is that we all have the ability, the potential to be like Adolf, each man. The man who just was carrying out his day-to-day job. How many times have you done something that you were just instructed, I had to do it. It's not my fault, I had to do it. I didn't plan to talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it. The election is coming up soon, next year, right? And I see a lot of people saying different things, different opinions on who to vote and who not to vote. Everybody has their own political philosophy. Everybody has what they believe should be who should be the next president, or what the next president should do. And when we have issues, real issues on ground, I had interacted with some tweets where after the killing in Jos, someone said, well, these killings are not true. They are just a facade. People are actually not dying. This is just a way to make the president look bad. Now, we can have our different opinions on whether that is the case or not, but the truth is that people have lost their lives. And the person who is behind the phone tweeting is in his bedroom or in his office or whatever he is, making such statements. To him, he's just spilling his own opinion. But there are real people somewhere far up north who are facing real challenges, who are facing real consequences of actions from other people. This is not a place to give your opinions or political opinions. I do not have I think it's something that, in my opinion, and may even be beneath this conversation. But my point is, you can be so disconnected from reality that your actions, which are in themselves evil, may have consequences far off from you, and that you do not feel it. Now, that takes you to the second point, which is Christopher Brownie's book. Now, The Ordinary Man is such an interesting book. My experience in the book is interesting because what had happened was the Nazi army, and there's a reason why I always reference World War II. World War II is the most studied world war in history, at least, that I know of. But it is the most, there are a lot of articles, a lot of books written on the World War. And a lot of them are psychological, a lot of them are political, a lot of them are historical. So the reason why this is the place I go to when I want to study evil or study nefarious activities or how people are being pushed to do something bad is because there are a lot of articles on it. Christopher Brownie wrote this book on the police battalion. And he found that the Reservoir 101 battalion in Poland, this was Nazi Germany, the Nazi Germany police, committed about 1,300 murders of Jews. And these men were not particularly elite soldiers. So to give you the story, they needed people to join the military force. They didn't have as much people in their young ages to join the force. They went to call older men, people who were between the ages of 35 and 40. These people were not necessarily trained. They were not trained. There was no interrogation or no form of screening that happened to pick them. So that, like elite soldiers, they were not elite soldiers, they were human beings like me and you. They were blue-collar jobs, people who were carpenters, plumbers. And they were told to just join the army because they needed some hands in Poland, in Jofo, Poland. They were given guns. The training wasn't intensive on how to shoot, but they were given instructions to look for Jews and to shoot them and to kill them. These were ordinary people. Now, their commander, who is called Major Trapp, having gathered them, gave them an option to step away. If you do not want to do this, if you don't want to commit this evil, you have the opportunity to walk away. Only 12 of them did. Out of 60, only 12 of them did. Only 12 of them had the ability, the thinking to say, this thing we're about to do is evil. Let us step away from it. The remaining 50 people, when they were interrogated, the reason they didn't step away was because they didn't want to seem weak. They didn't want to betray their friends. Because stepping away would make them look like basically snitches or look like they were not man enough or macho enough. And the rest of the people that stayed back went on to commit very, very, very wicked actions. When you look at Browning's story, the men committed these offenses based off of 3 things, or 4 things actually. The first is peer pressure and conformity. They wanted to be together. They wanted to follow the herd. The second is the difference of authority. Let me touch here, in a bit. So, many of you are in school, and many of you also experience, Lagos life, and if you have found yourself in situations where you're under an authority that commands you to do something that is against your moral philosophy, your value system, or your faith. And I'm also a victim of this, or maybe not a victim, but I've also fallen into this trap where there's an authority that has demanded we do something that I think is against what I should do. But just because it is an authority and we have to defer to authorities, just like out of each man, we did. And while it may not be as big as what we have with the Holocaust or as big as what we have with, Cold Wars or other forms of activities that happened in the 20th century, other forms of nefarious activities, but that shows that we have the propensity, the innate desire to defer to an authority. So that was the second reason why they did. However, like I mentioned, Major Trapp had also given them the ability to step away if they didn't want to do it. The third reason was gradual adaptation. Now, this is interesting. I had mentioned last in term 1 that evil is like an incline. It starts and then you gradually sink into it. I talked about the endless depths of hell, where it starts with accepting the offer. It starts with accepting the gun. It starts with shooting one person. Then, and what happens is that when you commit these micro steps of evil, your conscience begins to judge you. But the more you ignore it and you descend into nihilism, you wake up one morning and realize that you're an entirely different person. The monster has emerged. So what happens is, and this is interesting. Let's say you hate, there's this quote, and this is just, I don't know who made this quote, but it's very interesting. It said, if you sit around death long enough, you stop perceiving it. So basically, when you start with the small steps of evil leads to large jumps of evil. So you have to catch yourself when you're doing the little small things. Now I'm going to give specific scenarios that speaks to you, your day to day. The fourth reason why, which was the most unsettling, was careerism. Which we just wanted to advance their career. They didn't have any issues with the Jews. They were normal people. They were not necessarily victims of propaganda of Nazi Germany. These were older men. These were people who were in their early 30s, late 40s. These were not people who were young, where they had to be cultured into hating Jews or falling victim of the Nazi philosophy. These were older people who have been way alive before Hitler came on board. But somehow they fell victim of this very small act or small glitch in psychology, which is, first, you want to defer to authority. You want to be part of the herd. Again, we're going to talk about the herd mentality in Module 3. And you want to just advance your career. So you just cut it off. You just, I'm not killing people. I'm not committing genocide. I just want to advance my own career. The reason why the first guy, which is out of each man, and the second set of individuals, the reservoir, the ordinary men, committed these atrocities was because they were not thinking. They were not thinking about their actions. It's thoughtlessness. So every time you have an action, you want to perform an action, or someone has told you to do something, do you sit back and ask the why? And again, we'll discuss more about this in Module 2.